This is part 2 of how to create a parenting schedule. Now, in the previous video, we talked about some of the basic outlines and the factors you need to think about. We also talked about the school schedule. In this video, we're going to be focusing on the breaks from school, holidays, and some other things that you need to be thinking about when creating your parenting schedule. We previously discussed the factors you need to consider when creating a parenting plan. One of the most important things for your children is a consistent schedule. If possible, you want to have a similar morning routine, a similar evening routine, so that way they get the consistent schedule that they need to thrive. Now, before I go any further, I want to take a moment and just pause because I know a lot of our clients are aware that the number of overnights impacts child support, and that can influence their decision making. And I really want to take a moment here to urge you not to consider child support when you're setting your parenting schedule. Too often I see people asking for overnights when they really have no business asking for overnights, because at the end of the day, it's going to impact their children. If you have to wake up early to get to work, don't ask your kids to wake up early just so you pay less in child support. Now let's talk about breaks from school. When we talk about breaks, we're really talking about summer break, winter break, spring break. Now, there's not a right way to construct a parenting plan when it comes to these breaks, but there's some considerations that you need to think about when you're making your plan. So, for example, some parents on spring break just keep the regular schedule because they're not going to have time off from work or whatever the reason. Some parents like to alternate the entire spring break. Other parents like to split it in half. There's no right or wrong. These are just your options and things that you need to be thinking about. Now, when you're deciding what schedule you should use for breaks, it's really important to ask the right questions first. For example, do you plan to travel? Does your ex plan to travel? Do you have family that's out of town? If the answer is yes, then it might make more sense to do an alternating schedule rather than trying to split things up or keep things the way they are. So when you're creating your spring break and winter break schedule, it's important to ask the right questions. Do you plan to travel? Does your ex plan to travel? Do you have friends or family outside of your geographic area? If so, you may want to consider breaking these up into larger chunks or alternating years. This will allow you the opportunity to travel and not have to rush back. Now, another really important question to ask when defining spring break and winter break: when does it start and when does it end? See, if you ask a kid when spring break starts, it's right when the bell rings as soon as they get out of school. But if you ask the school, it's usually the Monday through Friday of the following week. So it's really important when you create that parenting plan that you clearly define when does it start, when does it end. This way you can plan ahead and you're not assuming that the other parent's on the same page as you. Now let's talk about summer break. With summer break, it's a lot longer, usually about 10 weeks or so in any given year. So there's a lot more things that we have to take into consideration here. I do want to note that you also want to define when does it start and when does it end. This way we can avoid any weekends being swapped inadvertently. But you have to take into consideration other things. Who's going to actually be available? Will your work schedule allow you to be with your children? Can you keep the same school schedule that you had during the summer? Or do you need to find somebody else to help with your children? It's really important that you have these honest discussions with yourself and with your ex, so that way you can create a summer schedule that works best for your kids. Now, I know we already talked about the winter break, but winter break has some unique components because it also has holidays in there, which we'll discuss here in a moment. But with winter break, you usually have Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, and New Year's Day crunched right in the middle. And it never works out where it can break up evenly in half. So it's really important that you think about these things and try and come up with a plan that works for your family. Now, we know that winter break has Christmas and New Year's. So let's talk about holidays and what you should be thinking about when it comes to creating a holiday schedule for you and your family. Now, I often see people trying to do what others do. They look for a normal schedule or a template, but I would urge you not to do so. Instead, focus on what you want and really what makes sense for your family. So for example, we have several families that celebrate Christmas Eve every year and they don't celebrate Christmas Day and vice versa. Now, if your family always celebrates Christmas Day and the other family always celebrates Christmas Eve, it doesn't make any sense for you guys to alternate Christmas Day. Just set it up so that you can be with your family on your day and your spouse is with theirs on their day. Although there is no normal for when it comes to holidays, it is very common to see people alternating years. For example, one year mom gets Christmas Day with the kids, the next year dad gets Christmas Day. But if your family has unique holiday traditions, don't try and force that schedule onto your situation. We have some clients that they always spend Christmas Eve together because that's when their family gets together and they don't get together on Christmas Day. In that situation, it makes no sense for us to force an alternating schedule onto them when they're not even going to be with their family. Now, it's very common for holidays to have parties alternate years. For example, one year someone gets Thanksgiving, the next year the other person gets Thanksgiving. Or you could do the same thing with Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. It's very common, quite frankly, for one parent to get Christmas Eve and one parent to get Christmas Day. But I urge you again to not fall into the trap of doing what others do. Instead, focus on your situation. If your family always gets together for Christmas Eve and you know your exes always gets together for Christmas Day, don't enter a plan that you have alternating schedules. Instead, put a schedule together where you get Christmas Eve every year and your spouse gets Christmas Day every year. Also, you may want to consider travel. For example, if you have to travel for the Thanksgiving holiday, it doesn't make any sense for you to have a Thanksgiving where you split it in half. Instead, you might want to consider alternating years where you get a longer weekend out of it so you can plan ahead and make travel arrangements. The last thing that we want to talk about when making a parenting plan is some flexibility. And in particular, I'm talking about special events. There also needs to be flexibility for work schedules and just day-to-day life. But in particular, it's important that you have a parenting schedule that accounts for special events. You see, we can work really hard to try and make a perfect parenting plan, but I've done this a long time, and I know that there's things that are going to come up that we didn't think about. And special events are some of those things that will happen, such as a funeral, a wedding, family reunion. These things are outside of your control. So it's really important that you have a parenting plan that thinks that far ahead and accounts for allowing your kids to be a part of those special events. One other special thing to consider within a parenting plan is a right of first refusal. Now, a right of first refusal basically says that if a parent is not with the children for a certain amount of time, the other parent gets an opportunity to watch the children or be with the children before a third party takes them. For example, you could have a right of first refusal that says if a parent is not with the children for 8 hours or more, the other parent gets the opportunity to have the kids. Now, I don't recommend this in a lot of situations. In fact, I will only recommend it if the parents get along reasonably. You don't want something like this to be used as a weapon and a reason to go back to court. Instead, you want to really be thinking about what's best for your kids. Now, as a parent, I can understand, why would somebody else be with them when I can be with them? So you want to think about it both ways. Do you want to offer parenting time to the other, your ex, when it's your time, and vice versa? If you're considering a right of first refusal, I like to recommend that we think for long periods of time. You don't want to have short windows like 8 hours because that's a work day. Do you want to have to offer your spouse every single time you go to work? Or what if you just get invited out for an afternoon game? Do you want to have to offer your spouse? Maybe yes, maybe no. It's up to you in your own specific circumstances. But in order to avoid litigation and possible problems, I would instead focus on longer terms, such as overnights or multiple days away from your kids. We hope you enjoyed this video series. Don't forget to like and subscribe below. If you have any questions or have a topic that you'd like to see answered, feel free to use the comments below or reach out to us.